the best coaches in the game. We really ain't playing. We regroup up in the Slack chat where the coaches debrief. We be piecing these puzzles, occupy the chunk of the pie. Ain't no lie when we hit the block, helmet's casket is top. You be seeing helmet after helmet, helmet after helmet. First place, second place, fifth place, 8th place, 12th place, 15, 16, 20. So many helmets, you got blurred vision, we got too many.
Hello and welcome to the Taco Tuesday PGA DFS podcast, presented to you by DFSArmy.com. Getting ready for another exciting season of the PGA Tour. I know last season got a little funky. We're ready to start things off fresh. We're here at the Wailea Country Club in Honolulu, Hawaii. An event I was fortunate enough to go to and see in person last year. Watched from Thursday to Sunday. It was a really fun time. Awesome event despite the weather. It was one of the last events before the inevitable COVID break. And since then we haven't had fans allowed back in PGA Tour events. So missing those, but still really good memories here at this place. And I'm excited to get to talk about it again here on this podcast. The first one of the year. First official event. I know last week we were in Hawaii as well with a reduced field at the Century Tournament of Champions. But this kicks off the regular season. This is a very consistent event. It's kicked off the season for quite some time now. Always the same course. And always the same sponsor. And speaking of sponsors, that's a crappy segue into, of course, the little housekeeping that I got to get done before we get into the meat and bones of this podcast. I'll keep it quick. DFSArmy.com. That's where you can go to find all of our premium products. Projections, Research Station, Domination Station. Research Station has an in-depth statistical breakdown of all of the things that you will need to succeed in fantasy golf. We got our cheat sheets. Me and Josh put out great cheat sheets every single week, and they'll help you in a pinch if you just want to hurry and play. And we also go pretty in-depth with it. And Josh is very good at breaking down who to play and, maybe more importantly, who not to play. The Chalk Donkeys of the Week. That article is a phenomenal read. And you can find that here on DFSArmy.com, along with our Domination Station lineup optimizer. And you can either sign up with a single sport PGA package or the full inclusive VIP access and get all of our sports. We cover them all. We cover them all really well. DFSArmy.com, promo code TACO. Get you that 10% off. So, onto the course here. Wailea Country Club. It's a par 70. Pretty easy course. Now, last year, kind of a fluky event. Very, very fluky event, actually. I'm talking with the locals there. The weather that they had, during my stay at least, was unprecedented. A word you're probably tired of hearing. But it is true. Very rarely in Hawaii do we get such windy conditions, such rainy conditions. The first day, Thursday there, the wind just was insane. Wind that we have not seen at Wailea Country Club in a very long time. Shook up a lot of guys' games. So, not really looking to last year's course history as much as usually would. This tends to be a course where course history does come into play. There's a lot of guys that are successful here year after year after year. The general trend of the course, it's an easy one. A lot of birdies and a lot of eagles, despite there only being 2 par 5s. These par 5s are some of the easiest on the PGA Tour. You got hole 9 with a whopping 7.7% eagle rate. Very short 508-yard par 5. 61% birdie rate. This is where everyone gets their free scoring in. And then it ends with the second par 5. Par 5 18. Pretty iconic hole. 538 yards. 3.5% eagle rate. About a 50% birdie rate. Very, very, very gettable par 5s, both of these. So, despite there only being 2 par 5s on the course, a lot of eagles. A lot of holes that are just extremely easy. Hole 7, hole 12, hole 14. All really easy holes. and should get a lot of scoring here. Should get scores into the -20s. I know we didn't last year, but of course that was because of the weather conditions. I got so bad on Sunday, they had to do lift clean in place. I remember it only took a few hours until basically all of the spectator paths had become nothing but mud. Socks soaked the entire day. It was pretty rough out there, but it should be perfectly pristine conditions this year. Weather looks beautiful. Wind looks mild. So we should go back to the easy scoring Waialae Country Club that we know and love. In years past, the field is usually a pretty easy one. Pretty weaker field for an event. It's quite the travel out here. Very vacation-y feel. It's definitely something that you notice with guys. A lot of guys just relaxing. Almost everyone that played in the event last week, the Tournament of Champions, they stay and play here. So even though you've got guys like Harris English coming off a win, I know usually you just take the week off right after that. Usually guys do a good job of just parlaying that finish and hopping over an island, taking a little ferry or plane ride, and just playing the next week. It's a really chill environment. Hawaii is just a place that'll relax your spirits. And a lot of the same guys do well year after year here. A lot of them make the trip here constantly. And some people just avoid it. I know Sergio's playing this thing for the first time in over a decade this year. The guys who played the week before in the Tournament of Champions, they finished about 20 positions better on average than guys who didn't and made the flight over for the Sony Open. But of course, that's a little biased because all those guys that played in the Tournament of Champions had to be good enough to at least win a tournament. But with there being a long break, this year not so long, but there's usually a pretty long break in between the fall swing and the Tournament of Champions, which is usually the first event of the year. This year we only had 1 month, pretty much the month of December. We were off because we were, cramming in majors in November because this last year was wild as could be. But had the month off, so the people that played this week or the last week, usually the theory is those guys are gonna play well into this week. Very similar conditions, very similar greens, very similar environment. But I think that not having spectators will be a factor, and we've seen that in a lot of places where, they don't have all the infrastructure that's needed for stands, and fans and accommodations, stuff like that. I know last year, in the waning holes, where Brendan Steele ended up matching Cameron Smith to get into a playoff. Those final holes, there were some really bad shots that, went behind giant stands and scoreboards, etc. And those all aren't going to be here. There's no point for them. There aren't any fans to accommodate for. So the course is going to play a little more open. We see a lot of courses doing this where some of the approaches, some of the drives are not going to be quite as tight because there aren't as many obstacles, I guess, to get around. But at the same time, you also don't have spectators flattening down the grass, so the out of bounds shots or the way off the beaten path shots that end up where spectators are usually they aren't too bad. But those just little factors like that, things we've noticed that kind of make things play a little different from since returning from the COVID break. It's been harder to predict winners. The guys with the biggest edge don't seem to have the biggest edge anymore. You can see some more underdogs coming up with some surprise victories. And the fields are generally stronger after that long, time off. The fields got a little stronger. It just played a little different. You can tell there's a different kind of golf being played. That and there's a general shift in golf itself towards, most of the top players now are long drivers who aren't so good at putting. We're seeing that come into play more and more. This is a very, very short course, and we've had a lot of really, really short off the tee guys. Your more accuracy, older guys that hit at 290 or so, guys like Kucher, guys like Patton Kizzire, Fabian Gomez, Johnson Wagner, KJ Choi, Zach Johnson. A lot of these shorter guys win this event. You see a lot of guys who are generally just pretty good putters, putting well, tend to win here. Usually you can't really overpower this course, and a lot of those guys just don't really show up here in the first place. It's a stronger field this week, but we don't have guys like Bryson, Dustin Johnson, even Justin Thomas, who missed the cut here last year. Those aren't the guys showing up here. We've got at the top of the field, Webb Simpson, Harris English, Colin Morikawa, your ball striker types. Those are the guys at the top of the field. Those are the favorites. We had Patty Reed up there, but he ended up withdrawing. This is historically not really a place where just statistics overall really factor in too much. This is one of the courses where long-term form, course history, these kind of things come into play more than being good at certain stats. Most of the stats correlate pretty low compared to average. So there might be some merit to fading guys who are the more statistical darlings, and maybe playing some guys that like to start the season off hot. You've got a lot of guys who are very good in the West Coast swing early part of the season and do that consistently year to year. Again, with it being such a short course, none of these guys are going to be overpowered. There's not really too much of a point in doing that. Those guys are definitely in play. So guys like Zach Johnson, Matt Kucher are going to want to consider more than usual here, as those are the types that usually do pretty well. And, putting isn't as useless of a stat as usually would be. I did some looking into the last 3 years at this event, and I looked into the statistics they had going into this event and which ones correlated with success here the most. Be that making the cut or just having a really good finish, scoring well. Things like strokes gained approach, which is usually incredibly important. Most of the strokes gained categories, they kind of factored in a lot lower than they usually would, which does make some sense. It's been some time since we've played events, and not only that, but played events that had shot link data. A lot of the tournaments we went to in the fall swing did not have shot link data, so statistics a little rusty here. So even though the research station is an awesome and great tool, you should definitely still check it out. It's worth noting that guys that are popping off due to statistics, they're just a little stale. Not as stale as they usually would be here in the past, with usually like a 2 or 3 month break in between, where most of the top golfers don't even really play and just take time off for the holidays. But still, it's been over a month since we've had an event outside of the Century Tournament of Champions last week that only 40 guys went to. Looking at the stats that really did factor in, projected DraftKings fantasy points per round was a really big one. You can find that on the research station. It looks at all the holes and their hole lengths and what they average as far as DraftKings fantasy point scoring on each one. Just combine that up to see who has the best fantasy scoring fit for the course. That really helped in predictability for guys making the cut. And as far as predicting winners, top 10 finishes, actually the Tournament of Champions finishing position was huge in that regard. Not so much for making the cut. A lot of those guys actually missed cuts the week after, but a ton of them came in top 10. It's by far the most predictive stat for finding out who's going to have a top 10 finish. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, a little biased just because those are all people capable of winning. But still. Some other stats that really stuck out to me are made cut percentage, long-term made cut percentage, way more predictable than usual. Just long-term kind of form overall. And the ones that didn't really seem to matter at all are driving distance, Again, this is a very, very, very short course, one of the shortest courses on tour, and you're not going to be able to overpower it. Everyone can pretty much reach the par 5s in 2. Pretty much everyone in the entire field. So the usual par 5 scoring advantage, it just isn't really there. And double bogey or worse percentage. Again, this is a super forgiving course. One of the easiest courses usually that we go to. And one of my favorite stats from last week, or for any no-cut event, the birdies are better gained stat. That didn't really matter as much. If you look at the total score distributions for each tournament on the year, this ranks second in the tightest spread. Honestly, the advantages that guys usually have over others, the higher ranked golfers over, more the mid-range golfers, not the scrubs. Of course, the scrubs are always kind of be bad, but that advantage to the top guys really isn't here as much as at other courses. Again, everyone scores around the same usually, like in comparison to other courses. That tight distribution of scores is something we see here a lot. So no need to really go with the top rated plays, the high owned plays. Going to be another week to get off some chalk, but I'd add a lot of merit to guys that are good at making the cut, have long-term form, good, steady, consistent golfers, veteran golfers. Older golfers tend to do pretty well here, and guys with a cool, consistent demeanor. Those are going to be the guys you're going to want to look for. The guys that are consistent. Of course, in GPP, you're going to want to take more of your aggressive type plays, of course, but the cash game type picks for me aren't as off the table in cash as compared to other tournaments. And of course, I'm looking for those low-owned guys as well. This is the first event in a while, I think, where driving distance isn't a huge advantage. Most of the events in the fall swing, and especially last week at Waialae, a lot of Bombers courses in there, but this is definitely a Webb Simpson type course, and he's going to start off the field here, top right into the field, and look at the top price golfers in the field. Webb Simpson, 11,100 on DraftKings, 12,000 on FanDuel, appropriately priced, could be priced a little higher. He's insane here. 6 straight top 20 finishes, third last year. He's one of the 3 guys that I followed. I followed Webb Simpson, Colin Morikawa, and Ryan Palmer here all Thursday last year. Watched their entire round. Because I hadn't done that before. I hadn't followed a round. I'm usually always walking around, looking for crowds, looking for the next good golfer coming off the tee. This time I actually stuck by and just watched the entire round of these guys. Of course, this was the round with the most wind. The wind was out of this world. I posted a video on my Twitter just showing the wind. It was ridiculous, and it kind of came in waves with the ocean surrounding the course. It was pretty wild and unpredictable. So Webb Simpson actually did not do well at all that first round, but then turned it around and had a killer final 3 rounds. Ended up finishing third. Is 4th here in 2018, and just a top 20 machine here. He's probably going to be the highest owned play of anyone. It's very easy to save salary this week, and Webb Simpson just makes a ton of sense. He didn't really do that great last week in the Tournament of Champions. He was just atrocious off the tee, and it was really bad, but I don't think that will matter quite as much here. This is a great bounce back sort of spot, but even then, still, the rest of his game was on point. Fairway to green game, or fairway to hole game, I guess, was on point. He rates out by far number 1 in many of the stats that we have here on the research station. Stat Cruncher, which allows you to weigh in all sorts of different stats, make yourself a custom model. He's ranking number 1 by far in my model, and pretty much everyone's model. He should be coming up number 1. He's way up there, made cut percentage. The dude never freaking misses cuts. makes 89% of his cuts, and he's just been so ultra consistent over the last 3 or 4 years. He's what, 6th ranked in the world now? He's insane. You've got him at the top here, and in GPP, no. In cash, yeah, that's how I see it. In cash, I always play Webb Simpson, at least over the last few years, and it's basically always worked out for me. His price has finally caught up to, him being, the favorite at events now, and he's honestly earned it. And outside of weeks where everyone knows it's Webb week, like this week, he usually tends to go a little under-owned for the more flashier plays, but he's Mr. Consistent, probably the most consistent golfer on tour. So I'm looking for this week, but only in cash games, really. And it's easy to afford him in cash, especially on DraftKings. But as far as GPP goes, with the Webb week, he's very, very likely to get the top 20, top 10, but he's the favorite to win. For a guy priced this high, he's not. His odds are like 10-1. It's not like when Justin Thomas or Dustin Johnson's in the field, they're like 5-1, 6-1, 7-1. Usually, I don't really care to pay up for guys that are more than double digits in their odds at the top of the field. And as much as I love Webb, it's going to be a cash-only play for me. You got Harris English, last week's winner, basically the hottest golfer on the planet right now. $10,800. Absolutely insane price for him. If you've been playing fantasy golf for quite a while, over the last 4 or 5 years, English has spent most of his time in the 6 to 8K range. Seeing him at the top of the field, almost 11K, is absurd, but this is a place he has 3 top 10 finishes at, and in the last 3 events played in the PGA Tour, he has 3 top 10s. Hell, 3 top 6s, really. Honestly, going back his last, if you count the event with Kucher, the shootout, where he won that as well, the dude's got 6 top 6 finishes since the playoffs last year. So, insane form. The dude was an absolute top 20, top 25 monster all year long. His consistency was honestly amazing, playing by far the best golf of his career, making about every cut. His made cut percentage is right there with Webb Simpson's, and his top, he finishes in the top 50% of fields, 83% of the time, top 25% of fields, 57% of the time. Not really even doing it with his irons like most people. He's just been an insane putter. Very strong off the tee and around the green. Honestly, the approach game is the worst part of his game, but that really hasn't held him back, and he's not really been a winner on tour. But for the last few months, he's gotten 2 wins. Of course, the one with Kucher, absolutely smashed and dominated. Not a lot of people are going to know about that, though. It's not going to show up on any game logs. And there were no stats from that event, but him and Kucher scorched the field. 3rd time they had ever won that event. So the thing with English is, in GPP, I actually do like him this week. It's the opposite of Webb. I know that he has probably the best looking game log. If people are just game logging, I know that DraftKings recently reset the game log that they do every year around this time. It only shows their last few events, and of course over the last 3 events he finished 6th, 5th, and 1st. But people really don't like to play guys the week after a win. Usually they take a week off, but whenever I see a guy win, the next week their ownership is always insanely reduced. I see a lot of people talking about just being off of him. His price jumped big time. So in tournaments, I really don't see his ownership being as high as it should be. I mean, if you hid the name Harris English and just had it as, just a random golfer with the stats he's been putting up and his recent form, you'd think it was, a top player. And he's kind of getting there, honestly. Obviously, some regression is due. That is true. So in the upcoming weeks, you might want to hop off him. It's just this week in particular, I like attacking the guy that is in insane form, coming off the win. And people are just superstitious about that. I'm not really. I've seen plenty of guys perform just fine the week after a win. And honestly, he came 6th and 5th and then 1st, of course, after getting a win that not many people will think about. He's been just so consistent, so amazing. And if you're going to reduce his ownership at all, especially with his price and guys around him, I love the play. So I'll play him a lot in tournaments, actually. Even though on paper it doesn't seem like the right play. That's what I'm going to do this week. Going down here, we have Colin Morikawa, probably the biggest name player in the field. One of the best ball strikers in the world already. Super young talent. Had quite the debut season last year. The dude actually shot the best round. He was the round 1 leader last year, despite the weather. Went bogey free. It just looked awesome. I knew he was something special after watching him, just looking at his poise, his composure. Kind of faltered back a little bit in the final 3 rounds last year, but still, since then, he's won a WGC event, he's won a major. The dude's insane. He's such a good ball striker. His ball striking is excellent, and it's just the putter, of course. His putter is his downfall easily. He actually hasn't been in the best form since getting his major win. Honestly, since then, it's been kind of okay. Before that, he was constantly putting up top finishes, and he made like his first, I forget however many cuts, but it was like the second most consecutive cuts made to start a career since Tiger Woods. Just absolutely insane. I think people are going to gravitate to him, especially with him being priced cheaper than English. I think, they're the same odds right now, but I think a lot more people would expect Morikawa to win over English going back-to-back. You don't really see that a lot. So, yeah, he's a play that you could definitely make. I'm taking him in spots, more like tiers, but he's a strong play to consider. You got Joaquin Neiman, who came runner-up last week to Harris English, had an awesome performance. Really, his last 8 or 9 starts out on tour were just excellent. Had quite the fall swing. Gotten his price way back up there. For a while, he had kind of fallen off through most of last year. Only occasionally having some good finishes, but missing a lot more cuts than we expect out of him. Wasn't that great here last year, but right now he's looking about as good as could be. His approach game is by far the best of anyone priced up here at the top. It's really coming into form. Gaining over a stroke approach over his last 10 rounds. No one else in like the top 10 price golfers is gaining more than like half his stroke approach over their last 10. So strong iron play there. But again, I'm not looking at the stats as hard as I would usually. Usually I'm a big sucker for the guys whose approach game are super strong, but I'm really looking to attack ownership here. I think Neiman is overpriced at this point. He's like 20-1, and he's right next to Morikawa in price, who's like 12-1. Not enough value for me there, but people will see the reduced game log, see he's coming off a second, and has made a bunch of cuts in a row here, and will probably gravitate towards them. I'm looking again more to these pivot plays, and speak of the devil, you got Hideki Matsuyama here at 10,200. Finished about last place at the Tournament of Champions last week. His putter was absolutely atrocious. Had one of the worst putting performances I've ever seen. If you go on the research station, look at the strokes gained tab. You can see his first 3 rounds last week. Lost 4.5 strokes putting, lost 3.5 strokes putting, then lost 2 and almost 3 strokes putting the first 3 rounds. It was nutty. He would not have made the cut if it wasn't a no-cut event, but in the final round, he actually put it together and gained almost a stroke putting. So there's some leverage to be attacked here. I know that people who game log will see a 41st and not think it's the worst, but I mean, most people playing golf around this time are going to be mindful of the fact that he was absolute dog water last week, and his ownership is not going to be very high, maybe double digits at most, and compared to all the other guys in this range, he's going to be the lowest owned. Pretty confident about that. But I actually do like Hideki a lot here. Tee to green, his game was as awesome as it has ever been. And just a few events ago, he finished 13th at the Masters, another great Masters showing from him, and the week before, runner-up in Houston. So if you're willing to scrap last week's Tournament of Champions finish from Hideki and take a good leverage play here, he's a great place to attack in tournaments. Then you've got Daniel Berger at $10,000, the last guy 10K or above. He's going to be an insane play. So with Patrick Reed withdrawing, we look for some line movement up at the top of the board. Didn't really see much movement from all the guys I've spoken about so far, but Daniel Berger and the guy priced right next to him, Sungjae Im, both fell to about 15-1. Now for reference, Neiman and Matsuyama are like 20-1, so expect Im to be quite popular this week. Berger, very much like Harris English, last year was a breakout season for him. He started out off the COVID break. Well, to start the season, he started the season off just tremendously, tons of top 10 finishes. And there's that big break. You think, okay, is he going back to form? No, immediately starts off with a win at the first tournament back. And then the week after that, third at the RBC Heritage. And then right after that, second at WGC, third at the Northern Trust. So he finished the regular season last year just on an absolute rampage. Hasn't missed a cut since. Was 10th last week at Maui. And honestly, he's probably going to be the second or third highest owned player for sure. I think there's quite a gap in ownership between Simpson, Berger, Im, and the rest of the board. So super chalky play. Starting a cash lineup off with Webb Simpson and or Daniel Berger is probably the way to go this week. Huge value there, but that's going to be some massive chalk. And he's not really doing it through ways that are like, super statistical. He's not going to pop off too much in stat models, but his second in projected round score. But, his strokes gained stats are, just kind of chilling around average in most categories. It's not like he's doing any one thing well. It's not like he's Russell Henley or someone that's just been popping off on the stats. He's just been steady and consistent, doing everything well. He's finished in the top 50 here in all five of his events he's played. A few top 15 finishes as well. Berger, just really safe cash game play for me. If you're not playing Webb Simpson, play Berger. But in GPP, I'm going to go underweight on him for sure. Then you got Sungjae Im. Im, very similar play to Berger here, although he was not nearly as consistent in the 2020 season, that is for sure. If you look back at pre-COVID break, back about a year, Im was almost on a similar rampage as Berger is on this last year. He was doing extremely well, even came back with a top 10, the first event back from the COVID break, and then he just had a horrible, horrible stretch of golf, missing cuts, and that pretty much went through the playoffs into the end of the regular season. But since the U.S. Open, the Masters, the fall swing, since then he's actually gone back to having really solid form. A couple of top 5 finishes in his last 3 events. No missed cuts, one missed cut at the RSM. Other than that, he's been making his cuts. This is a place where he's finished top 25 each time he's come here the last 2 years. One of the places that's going to be the closest to his home in Korea. Could be super popular, and I don't blame him. Huge line movement on him. One of the biggest line movements I'm seeing of anybody, so definitely a hot play, but I don't know how I feel about him. I'm probably not going to play him, but I'm going to hold on to him. He's such a nice guy, though, each time I've gone to an event, I've seen Sungjae. He strikes up conversations, like during practice rounds. Just really happy and friendly. I remember he told me that, I asked him why he goes to so many events. And if he could go to every event, he would. And without hesitation, he was like, yes, the dude is a grinder. And this is a grinder's event. So love Sungjae. Wish I could play him. Ownership's going to be too high for me. I have to go elsewhere. It sucks. And this is just kind of how it is. He's not going to make the cash lineup. I like Berger more for that. So there's no place for Sungjae for me. But if you want to go ahead and play him for me, please go ahead. I hope that you guys play him and have great success. I'm not going to this week. Got to ride or die with the process here. So moving down to the 9K range, got some interesting plays. Of course, Cameron Smith, last year's winner. Anecdotally, I've noticed over the last few years that Australians absolutely crush in Hawaii. I don't know if it's the Pacific Ocean or what, but Smith obviously is very, very good here. His finishes here the last 4 years. Win 22nd, 18th, 27th. And he's coming into this event with some red hot form. The fall swing was amazing for him. He's had, he came in here with, 7 top 25 finishes in his last 8 events, something crazy like that. I know a few of those events were reduced fields, but just came runner-up at the freaking Masters, just like Sungjae M did. 4th, the Zozo Championship, pretty strong field there. Someone I played a lot last week at the Tournament of Champions didn't do that great, honestly. He came 24th, but of course this is a spot where, he got his big win. Expect him to be another, top 25 play, but again, I don't know, the ownership's it's not going to be too bad, I guess. The game log looks amazing, but his price so high and his odds are such a huge drop off of Sungjae. I don't know. Kind of iffy about this guy, but it's kind of whatever. Still got to figure out what I'm going to do with Cam Smith. He definitely deserved the win last year. I was happy to see him win. I'll probably stay off of him. I don't know. Still making decisions about stuff like that. Abraham Answer, $9,400. Kind of like Sungjae, he had gone through a little bit of a rough stretch after some super hot form, and he seems to be back in that form. Tons of top 20 finishes over the fall swing and through the last few weeks. So, Answer, getting priced up just due to that crazy consistency. Big time cut maker. Maybe Answer and Berger might be a decent way to start in cash. Strong cash game consideration, but I don't know if I'll get to him in GPP. The ownership won't be too crazy, but it's kind of whatever. And then you've got Ryan Palmer, one of the guys I watched last year. My takeaway from watching a Ryan Palmer round was this is the kind of guy that yells in the mic when he plays Call of Duty and gets killed and yells at people's mom. He'll hit like picture perfect shots, and maybe it's just the wind or something, but I noticed that he would hit a great shot and he would just yell tons of expletives after hitting it, even though it's almost a perfect hit. He ended up finishing 4th, and speaking of 4th, last week at the Tournament of Champions, he finished 4th. The Zozo Championship, his event he played before that, finished 4th. Maybe he'll finish 4th this year, the 4-4-4-4. I don't know, I'm just overthinking that at that point, but rating out super strong. Kind of up or down for him since the break. He had some horrible performances, but at the same time also some really good top 10s, kind of back and forth. So he's always been a wildly inconsistent golfer. So definitely a tournament GPP option. Adam Scott, $9,000. Has not really done well here in the past. Sporadically shows up to these events. He was like the last guy to play an event. He didn't play any of the regular season events on the tour since after the COVID break. He was like one of the last guys along with Stenson to show up. I think Fleetwood too, but yeah, he only makes appearances in the big events, and that's pretty much it. And I know that this is not a big event, probably not what he cares about. He's only playing it because he's in the Tournament of Champions, which had new rules this year to allow guys like Tony Finau and not Sungjae, sorry, Sungjae's a winner, but Hideki Matsuyama, those guys to to get in because they qualified for the Tour Championships. But Scott's here. It's probably not one that he would have played otherwise, but he's here as it is. Aussies, again, anecdotal, I don't have data for this, but I swear Aussies just do really well in Hawaii. And his ownership is going to be pretty dang low, I would guess. And if you look at last week, what he did, had 3 absolute fire rounds with his approach game. I can say the same about Ryan Palmer, too. He gained about 6.5 strokes approach. Very, very good performance from him last week. He just could not putt to save his life. That flips around at all this week. He could be a really, really sneaky play there at 9,000. You've got Kevin Kisner, who's got a ton of top 5 finishes here in recent years. Tons of top 5 finishes since the break. He has 4 of them since returning back in June. And a lot of them very strong fields. So definitely a guy to consider. Does well here year to year. A good tournament play there. Russell Henley. I kind of alluded to what I was going to do with him earlier. He's been on, honestly, since coming back from the break, he has been on fire. His irons have been crazy consistent. By far the best stats of anybody, and he had 5 top 10 finishes to go with it. Kind of slowed down recently. Missed the cut pretty badly at the Mayakoba Classic, which was the last event we went to before the Tournament of Champions. So I'm not using him this year. I know he debuted with a win here in 2013. He's actually missed 4 of his last 5 cuts here in Hawaii. And again, stat models are going to pump this guy out as usual. His ownership's been insane, and he's been worth it. Just not really the attack route I'm going for this week. Gonna go for the lower owned guys. Moving in through this 8K range, you've got Billy Horschel, Zach Johnson, Matt Kuchar. These kind of guys I'm actually quite interested in. Zach Johnson, winner here back over a decade ago, so not sure how relevant that is, but still several top 10 finishes in recent years. And his ownership had fallen to about 1 to 3% over the last 2 years. He really hasn't had any good performances. He's a very, very consistent cut maker. I think he hasn't missed consecutive cuts back to back. I think he only has 1 back to back missed cut in the last decade or something. But over the last year or two, we've seen him slow down. But recently, since the playoffs, he's actually had some top 10 finishes, and this is one of the better courses he's at. It's a super short course, which is always good for Zach Johnson, who is quite short off the tee. But this is definitely a Zach Johnson course, and his ownership is going to be, it'll probably be substantial, but not too crazy. I kind of like him this week. And you've got Matt Kuchar, who also have some reduced ownership, has the most insane course history here of anyone. Over the last decade, his finishes are 5th, 5th, 8th, 3rd, 13th, and 1st. Last year, he ended up missing the cut due to the brand new top 65 and ties rule that was set in place. So that screwed him royally. He came 67th, which just, if the cut line moved 2 spots, he would have made it after winning the year before. Of course, this being an insane course for him, but lost a lot of that in that round with that Thursday round with the weather and all. This is a great course for him. He rates out 5th in projected DraftKings fantasy point scoring per round, which is insane. He never ranks that high. This course is picture perfect for him. It's no shock that he does really well here, but his form coming in is absolutely atrocious. It's not Matt Kuchar-like at all. Matt Kuchar, a year or two ago, if you look back a decade, the stat with Kuchar was he has the most top 10 finishes of anyone over the last decade. And it's always a stat that really shocked you because you expect that to be a top tier player, but he's just such a top 10 machine that he just racks him up. And since returning from COVID break, he has 0 top 10 finishes and only 1 top 20 finish at a reduced Northern Trust field. So playing the worst golf of his life by far. It's going to keep his ownership pretty low. You're really just playing him off of course history here. Not really something I'm going to do. I could see him doing well here, but it's not like he's priced down super low. He's priced about right. Just more interesting plays. I'd much rather have the Zach Johnson here. Kind of skipped over Billy Horschel actually, but Horschel's kind of in the same boat where he's going to be lower owned, but almost never plays this course, has nothing really popping off statistically outside of some horrible iron play as of late. But he has a really good Bermuda grass putter, and we were on Bermuda this week, just like last week. So, that could help him out, but I don't know. Still not huge on Horschel. I think it's just overpriced here on both sides. Moving into the lower 8K range here, going to start skipping through some guys. Obviously, I can't talk about all 144 players in the field. I'd love to, but probably lose my voice by the end. Brandon Todd at 8,200. He's someone who last fall swing won multiple events, 2 back-to-back, was just on fire, and of course he regressed. That was to be expected, but he's actually shown up, and usually he's showing up at these courses where these shorter courses where he's not just gonna get bombed over. He hits it like 280 off the tee at best. Like, he's super short, so it's a great course for him. Almost always finishes top 20 here, and honestly, since the break, his form is definitely nothing like it was in the early season last year, the fall swing of last year where he was insane. But he's ramped it up. Top 10 finish at the Mayakoba Classic, 13th last week. Great course for him. After a bunch of Bombers courses, it's a nice little spot to go to Brandon Todd here. Lanto Griffin, this was the start of his insane start to his career last year where, through the fall swing and the early part of the season, he was just a top 20, top 15 machine, finished 7th here last year, and has 3 top 15 finishes in the fall swing going into this week. So Lanto is someone I'm definitely interested in at 8,100, but my favorite play of the week, as we hit the bottom of the 8K range here, it's going to be Charles Howell III. And this is not a play for someone who's in it to win it. This is a cash game lock, of course. Every year, CH3, with the utmost consistency, he makes pretty much all, if not most of his cuts to start off the year. Usually starts off the year with like a 10 to 12 made cut streak. Whenever it's winter, whenever it's fall, and we've been saying it for years now, and it keeps being true, until age catches up to him or whatever. But man, the courses that he's good at, and the ones he goes to every single year in the winter and in the spring, you just play Chucky 3 sticks here, and it just works out every time. His form here is just insane, absolutely insane. 8 top 15 finishes in the last 10 years here. I mean, just absurd numbers there. 12th here last year, 8th here in 2019, with his worst finish being 32nd since 2012. This is just one of his courses, man. You just write it out there. A good top 30 bet on DraftKings Sportsbook. I think that's a really, really strong bet to make there. Even top 20 as well. Already made those bets. Good spot for him. The form is fine. Yet he's one of the biggest slaves to course history of anyone on the PGA Tour, but especially, he just does the same thing every year. Starts off the year, makes a ton of cuts in a row, gets his bread, gets those top 20s, top 30s. Not too much of a winner, but he does have top 5 potential. And of course, once the summer hits or whatever, it all goes to crap and you forget about him. It's just a yearly cycle. And yeah, I usually just play a ton of him. I'm going to keep doing it. It's like tradition at this point. Until the wheels fall off with him, honestly. That's where I'm going. I'm plugging him in pretty much everywhere. His ownership is always too low. Cash game lock. Not much more to say about it. At the same price, Eric Van Rooyen, someone who's going to be super low owned, hasn't played much on the PGA Tour, but don't forget about this guy. He's very strong. His odds are atrocious compared to everyone else in this range. I have a spot where I'm using him though, and that is FanDuel. The FanDuel tiers that they have. I'm playing him a good amount in those just because he's like in the field part of it. He's actually one of the highest projected guys. As far as our projections go, he's one of the absolute highest projected guys in the field section. But he's like buried way deep down there because he hasn't really played much. I did withdraw from the Masters, but super sharp play to play in things like tiers or GPP, where you're gonna get low ownership on him, especially on FanDuel, where his European stuff doesn't show up the game logs. Just a sneaky little play there. Starting off the 7K range here, Emiliano Grillo right at the top, coming in incredibly good form, was atrocious, just absolutely atrocious when we came back from the break last year, missing cut after cut after cut. But since then, he's really become a cut-making machine, back to his old ways, still insane with his approach game, insane tee to green, and just not a good putter. He's never been a good putter, but he's actually gaining strokes putting over his last 10 rounds, and that's kind of scary. It's not something that we usually see from him, and there are plenty of events in there that didn't have shot link data, like Mayakoba or any of the ones that didn't take place in mainland America, or just there's several events where they just didn't have shot link. So who knows the full story there, but he's pretty consistently a guy that's just great tee to green, putting, but it actually looks pretty good for him as of late. Still super cheap. One of the highest projected value plays for the week, so definitely someone to consider there. Mark Leishman, I kind of like him this week. Going back to the anecdotal Australia angle that I'm taking this week. He's actually just a cut-making machine here. He has, 7 top 30 finishes here in the last decade. Made every single cut, always makes the cut here. The thing with him is he, since returning from COVID break, he has been probably the worst golfer, like the worst, compared to the years prior, where Leishman is a very consistent cut making machine, very good statistically. Since COVID break, man, he was god awful. Up until the Masters, his average finishing position was 79th, missing the cut almost every single time. All of his stats went in the garbage. So stat models are going to absolutely hate him. Optimizers will hate him. Even our projections, they hate him. But this is something that you can just kind of manually, have a little sneak at. Leishman, very good here at a course. Your course history seems to matter a little more than usual. And, had the break, had a nice refresher, played last week and did all right. Leishman super sneaky here. Brian Harmon, who, going back to the FanDuel tiers game system, he's by far the best play that you can make in the field in that game type. But Harmon, just a cut-making machine here. 4 top 20 finishes here since 2015. And since the playoffs in the regular season last year, up through the fall swing, he's been a cut-making monster. Really for a few years now, he's been a cut-making monster. Making over 3/4 of his cuts. And this week at $7,800, underpriced on DraftKings. Priced better on FanDuel, but just underpriced. One of the highest projected plays we have. Super safe, steady option. So if you're a fan of taking the CH3s, the safe plays of the world, Harmon's your guy. But if you're trying to win, then maybe not so much. But I don't even see his ownership really being that high, so it might be all right. Sebastian Munoz, $7,800. A guy who the odds always hate, but stats always kind of love. His approach game has been insane lately. You could go to him here. I think a lot of people I'm going to gravitate to Munoz this week. Last week was probably the week to take him, honestly. We've got Kokrak, who went bananas. And then, since the Masters, he's been god-awful. So, I don't really know what to make of him. He hit like top 25 in the world after his win. It's kind of crazy, but it's really cooled off since. I was skimming through the 7K guys. You've got kind of a similar play to Leishman with Russell Knox. Very great course history here, and coming off of absolutely horrible, awful form that had really gone on for like a year, but he's turned that around. He's still missing cuts. It's been super consistent, but now he's mixing the missed cuts in with top 20s, kind of all over the place. His last 7 events, he has 3 top 15 finishes and also a 23rd place finish at the Mayakoba Classic, the last event he played at, and that was a full field there. So, someone that the stats won't like too much, but he's definitely a guy on the rise, and he's still cheap. Matthew Neesmith, I like him at the same price, $7,400. Scott Piercy, $7,300. Makes the cut here every year. Has made a bunch of cuts in a row. Gonna be just, same old with him. Always good at the approach, always bad at the putter. He's kind of always the same kind of product you get with Mr. Scott Piercy, and he's super, super cheap. So, very, very strong cash game play there. James Hahn at the same price, though, is quite the opposite. Missed the last 2 cuts here, but the year before that, he finished runner-up at this tournament. Missed the cut badly his last time out, but he had a weird stretch of form where he had 3 straight top 10 finishes, and those are in his last 5 events that he's played. So a huge upside for Hahn, but compared to the other guys in this pricing range, his odds are kind of atrocious. Maybe a top 10 bet. I don't know. Tom Hoge at $7,300 looks super strong. You got Snedeker, a guy that's really fallen from grace. Does great here, but just like Kucher, he is in by far the worst form of his career and no top 10 finishes since returning from the COVID break. Super iffy play. Not sure about him. Stuart Sink at the same price. Had an odd renaissance. His game had fallen off too, and he randomly wins, which is not something we're used to seeing from old Stuart Sink. He's a cut-making machine here. Might be in consideration there. Jim Furyk, same price. Another older guy, another bald guy. But he has not played in quite a while, since before the U.S. Open. And honestly, it's just not been a very good play. His approach numbers are strong, but it's been kind of bait over the last year or two. But this would be a course that fits his style picture perfectly. $7,100. Sepp Straka, really, really popping off in the. Honestly, I don't know how he got this low in price. He's been a cut-making monster. His form since the return from COVID break is just awesome. Super consistent. Very strong approach game. Very strong putter. Very strong off the only weakness he has been around the green. And it's something you can kind of get away with here. So Straka, huge underpricing there. One of the highest projected value plays that you can have. Brendan Grace, same price though. Going to be super low owned. He's played here once, 2017, finished 13th. People never play this guy, but he's actually done pretty decently in his last 2 tournaments, low key. But he's also missed a ton of cuts since the COVID return. So just a little leverage play you can make there. Of course, my boy CT Pan, got to shout him out. The event closest to his home in Taiwan. Missed the cut here in his only event, but this is the kind of course that he does well at. He's short but accurate, and this is a short accurate course. Definitely something that I see him doing really well here. As we go into the 7K or the 6K range here, towards the bottom of the field, just gonna point out a few plays that really caught my eye. This little range at 6,900 is actually really good. Peter Malnati, Brian Stewart, who's another guy who does really well at short courses and actually has 4 top 10 finishes here since 2013. And then Doug Gim, who is low-key been playing really, really good golf since the return from COVID. Was a guy that rarely played before and had some good finishes, and then for a while just missed every cut, but is back in form. Really, really strong play, rated out amazingly. This range here at 6,900, all very strong plays. Michael Thompson, also 6,900, did really well last week at the Tournament of Champions, made a bunch of eagles, but usually it's just a guy that putts and that's it. Moving on down through the field here, the bottom of this field is pretty freaking weak. Not much to be extracted from here. Anirban Lahiri at 6,700. His last 4 events he's played, they've been sporadic as usual, but they've been really, really good. Some really good finishes and really good birdies or better gain numbers from him. And then Brian Gay, the same price there, just won 2 events ago, and he's a guy who really, really, really likes his shorter courses. Is really awful at Bombers courses usually. Kind of sticks out in odds. Of course, the odds are going to be bumped up a bit because of that win, of course. But just a good value play there. But he's incredibly risky, like super risky. Like that win had come after like 5 straight horrible miscuts. So very risky, but this is one of the places that's going to suit his style just perfectly. And at $6,600, the king of cash since the return of the break from COVID. A guy made the cut pretty much every single week until his last 3 events here at $6,600. Adam Shank. It's hard to know what to do with him because he was not ever coming in the top 25, but he would always pretty much settle into a top 30, top 40 finish and just be super, super consistent. 71% of his rounds finished in the top half of the field over the last year. That's pretty insane as far as consistency goes, but he's finally started missing cuts. Missed 2 of his last 3 cuts at pretty weak fields, to be honest. So ownership's going to be ultra low. Probably a very good play for GPP, but at the same time, he won't he's very, very, very unlikely to score super high. So I don't really know what to do with him this week. I might just get off of him like everyone else, but at the same time, not finding many other plays in this range, honestly. Bryce Garnett looks all right at $6,500. I think he's way too cheap, but he's kind of in the same boat as Shank, where great cut maker, but the upside, not really there. Then going down lower, Wesley Bryan, who had come back and looked really strong in his starts, but over his last 2 events have been just atrocious. But another guy, shorter off the tee, actually hitting it much longer, but came in originally as a guy that was, super, super short off the tee, but ultra accurate, his driving accuracy, and he's almost hitting at 300 now, after coming off that extended break of his. $6,300 maybe worth a shot. The rest of it's slim pickings, honestly. You've got Jerry Kelly, who's a course horse here, but he's getting old. 500 to 1 odds now. Usually a sign when they break 300-400 odds, that's when it's a sign that no one really expects them to do that well. Might make the cut, but I don't see another top 10 from him anytime soon. Maybe on the Champions Tour though. $6,100. One play I'll point out here has been atrocious, honestly, but just by name value or quality alone, Nick Watney sticks out at $6,100. If he returns to form even slightly, and it's been bad over the last year and a half, like bad, but he's a guy who has dealt with injuries big time. But if he ever puts it back together, he could be a really low-key, sneaky play. And he seems to be just by far the best play of anyone towards the bottom of the field here. But I'd try not to go to the bottom of the field here. I love the upper 6K range in this field. I'm perfectly okay with taking several of those guys and then just picking whoever you want at the top. Seems like a very good lineup construction strategy. For DraftKings, at least. for FanDuel, more of a balanced approach pretty much works. You usually afford whoever you want in FanDuel. It's not really a big deal. Just need to take one or two value plays. You don't even need to dip down towards the bottom. The value there is just lower 8K. It's not that bad. One guy I forgot to talk about. I'm obliged to. I have to. $6,500. Jimmy Walker. Former back-to-back winner of the Sony Open. Last 4 years or so, it has not been pretty for him. He made the cut barely over the last 2 years, but after winning back-to-back, he missed the cut multiple times. A lot of this, of course, is due to his diagnosis of Lyme disease that has taken a toll on him. And I've got to say, since the return from the COVID break, before that he had shown some signs of life, but he is bad, bad. Has made less than a third of his cuts over the last year. Missed pretty much every single cut. Only had one finish. His best two finishes since the return from the COVID break were 60th, 46th, and 62nd. Everything else he finished all the way towards the very, very back of the field. Just a man that just can't play anymore. It's sad to see, but I do have to shout him out because, back-to-back winner here in years past. Used to be an absolute course horse, but this course horse has got to go to the glue factory. I'm sorry, can't do it. But yeah, just wouldn't feel right if I didn't at least shout out Jimmy Walker a little bit here. Yeah, that's the field. Welcome back to PGA Golf. Another great season ahead of us. Make sure you're getting your one-and-done leagues, season-long fantasy leagues, and a few myself. For one and done, I'm rolling with Zach Johnson because I could see him falling back out of form again. It's just a perfect little spot for him. You could just do what a lot of people do, take someone like Berger, Webb Simpson, or M, but definitely want to hang on to those guys here. It's a weaker field. Tempting to burn Charles Howell, but of course there are tons of good Charles Howell courses, just like there are tons of good Webb Simpson courses. Definitely going to hold on to him, browse the menu a little bit before you burning those guys. But Zach Johnson's a play for me. And that'll pretty much do it for the pod, guys. DFSarmy.com. Promo code TACO to get you that lifetime 10% off. Access all of our premium tools. Look at the research station that I used, throughout this whole podcast, just referencing. Such a good tool. Has everything you could ever possibly need laid out for you in clear and concise detail. And, of course, lineup optimizer. And, of course, the great coverage for all the other sports out there. Get you through these tough times. We're all locked inside. Shoot. Might as well roll up some DFS. Love me some DFS. Glad to have it back. Breaks refreshing, but excited to start off a new season fresh. Looking forward to it. Good luck in your tournaments this week, guys. And we'll see you next week. See ya.